Welcome back to this series of Black Hat Fast Chats. We are joined now by Sam Curry, Chief Security Officer with Cybereason. Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Terry. Good to be here.
We've also got a nice meaty topic from ransomware to RansomOps, evolution of a threat. It doesn't get more timely than that. Let's start with just some defining characteristics of what RansomOps is versus the more traditional spray and pray approach of ransomware criminal activity.
Sure. So I think most people think of ransomware as just another iteration of malware, and in our heads, that means somebody clicked something, or maybe something hit a system and just detonated. And I think that folks then think of like a worm cascading through a network from that point of detonation. But this isn't that. This is instead the more advanced techniques for distribution, for deployment, the delivery mechanism, if you will, from what we used to think of as the advanced persistent threat. Mm-hmm. The toolkit of the nation state, right? It's the subtle and stealthy movement through a network. Instead of thinking detonation and then quick distribution, we should instead think subtle, silent distribution, lot like a demolition squad mining a bridge, and they go and they put the bombs on all the right struts, and then they simultaneously detonate. And so in the old days, we thought, okay, cyber crime was about fast grab, smash, get the money, get out of the vault. You dealt with that by hammering them back hard, right? It was a minimize their exposure. And we thought, on the other hand, of nation state warfare, almost like submarine warfare. It was this stealthy subs looking for each other. But what we've got now is financially motivated, devastating payload and a delivery mechanism straight out of the advanced persistent threat book, which is why we call it RansomOps. So, I mean, ransomware is a business model first and foremost, but rather than think of it as ransomware, think of it as operations to deliver ransomware. Sure. And now we're getting onto what RansomOps is all about.
Sam, related to this, it strikes me that some of the advanced technologies that we're seeing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, container technology, cloud technology generally, virtualization. Security vendors rightly tout these as breakthroughs and advances, but unfortunately, what you seem to be alluding to here is that the bad guys are using them for all sorts of bad acts online, including souping up their ransomware offerings. Is that accurate?
It is, but I think, look, the first thing we should say is that when people use these terms, blockchain or AI or machine learning or whatever the advanced technique is, in defense, as the end of a statement, as if they were unveiling a secret technique, my alarm bells go off.
Okay.
I'm not interested in some magic, oh, there's an AI, as if somebody solved the Turing challenge and now it can just stop everything. That's not interesting. People who start conversations with it, actually, it's much more useful. What we want to say is, so how are you using it? And then we know how are you not using it, because gaps will still exist. So if you're using, for instance, machine learning to look for files that have never been seen before, good or bad, and make a call, that's kind of interesting, but that only covers one gap. I don't like it when a vendor says, hey, I use machine learning and it'll just fix everything. Well, I don't believe that.
Right.
But now the other part of your question. So first of all, take with a grain of salt what a lot of the vendors claim, and instead ask yourself, is the application mature, and how does it reduce the risks and the gaps that I know exist in every program, and mine in particular?
Okay, that's a great distinction.
And now the attacker. So the attackers likewise use technology, but it's asymmetric. They're using machine learning, but in a completely different application to how the defenders are using it. And mostly what we see paying dividends for them is automation, the automated exploit of vulnerabilities to get the first beachhead in a company. And then they use ML, and in some cases AI, to give human beings on the other end a nicely triaged list of who's likely to be most valuable and easiest to exploit. So the human attacker is given this triaged list of best targets that they can then not waste their time and be highly efficient to develop to the point where they detonate and get a ransom. And by the way, this principle, regardless of the application, should be the same for both attackers and defenders, that there is intelligence in security, offense and defense. It's carbon-based. And our job is to make silicon to serve that, not to replace it, not to give us a magic bullet solution that says, oh, don't worry, I can stop ransomware because of machine learning. That's not interesting. Instead, Let me show you how machine learning makes your people more effective and closes gaps and reduces likelihood and reduces impact. And I imagine the same conversations are happening in the attackers' boardrooms. Let me tell you how machine learning can make you more efficient at getting more targets, higher likelihood to pay out, and so on. So ML is a tool. It's not the replacement at this point.
With that in mind, let's shift gears slightly to another technology, the Mitre Attack framework. Can you talk a bit about how the framework can be leveraged to defend against RansomOps?
Sure. So what I love everything about the Mitre Attack framework because it's open. It is in effect a taxonomy. It is a set of libraries. It is a set of it's a language, the tactics, the techniques, the way that bad guys actually behave in developing their attacks. And so it's changing. Why? Because the opponent changes. And so what Mitre Attack gives us is a common language, a lingua franca, for describing the behavior of the enemy that we're trying to stop. And it also gives us the ability not just to do red teaming, which isn't that interesting. It's like if I showed you a snippet of a basketball game and said, who's the better team? Well, you can't tell from one play. And if I said, well, who won the championship? You certainly can't tell that. What's interesting is when you can see it played out over many baskets in a game and many games, then patterns start to emerge. And so I like it best for red teaming and for purple teaming. I like to see how is this making the defense stronger, not trying to prove if they're doing their job or to make them weaker. And so what the attack framework gives us is both a way of describing what the attackers are doing that we can match. And by the way, there's also a Mitre shield, which is what are the technologies that can be applied and deployed against it. And it says, so this is the behavior. This is the activities and the actions of the bad guys that have to be stopped. Can you see them? Can you stop them? And that's not about any one product. That's about a program. And so for me, Mitre Attack is, regardless of whether it's produced by Mitre or not, there is a taxonomy that's emerging that's universal. And so I'm particularly happy that it's open, that this is accessible for anybody to use, and we can all develop and design to it, and we can all get better in defense because of it.
Talk a bit, if you would, about how XDR capabilities should map back to the Mitre Attack framework, and even how organizations can use this in early detection with RansomOps level attacks.
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is that the reason EDR exists is because it focused on large chunks, we can say in retrospect, of the Mitre Attack framework. It went to the endpoint to get much of the signal early in that attack sequence, in a kill chain or in what we call it Cybereason, malops or malicious operations. The point is that there's a trajectory, and EDR got to the critical data. It wasn't just about parsing every signal. It was looking for the signal of activities and actions of bad guys. XDR says, okay, it's not just about the endpoint. There are other signals that matter. There's other contexts that matter. There's more advanced analysis that matters, and response options. So in some ways, EDR filled the gap that SIM wasn't. SIM serves many useful purposes, but it was falling behind due to noise to signal ratio with the actual catching of bad guys in real time or close to it. EDR emerged and did a better job, and now XDR is the next evolution of that, in my opinion. XDR is not just SIM, say 3.0. It is the pursuit of the technology that can catch everything in the Mitre Attack framework as it evolves. That's the goal here. It's not an acronym. It's not just to make work. In fact, it's to make us much more efficient in what we do. And I call it the hero's journey. How do we get defenders to the point where our story is better and faster and more effective at catching things sooner, more completely, more actionably in that Mitre Attack framework? That's the goal of XDR. And it has to stay on course, because otherwise it's a very ugly world. Oh, and as for RansomOps, RansomOps is just development of another attack type with a nasty payload.
Some great perspectives on ransomware and, of course, RansomOps. Sam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Terry, thank you for having me. It's been great.
We've been talking with Sam Curry, Chief Security Officer with Cybereason. This has been Terry Sweeney for Black Hat. Join us for this next Fast Chat. See you soon.